just another story of the same. Ain't nothing wrong with having a good time. We can't sing. But just be respectful, dudes, and never learn. Until it's too late. What is happening, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Baltimore Bureau podcast. I'm Easy Jackson here with Dharna Noor, Dr. Khalilah M. Harris, Esquire. And we got a special guest today. For the first time this week, we're going to bring in a special guest, my good friend Faraji Muhammad.
Yes.
He is the host of For the Culture on 88.9, For the Culture with Faraji.
Absolutely. Please get that correct.
Because there's other For the Culture things out there, but there's only one with Faraji.
Absolutely.
My good friend I've known since high school. Baltimore School for the Arts representative in the building.
Absolutely.
What was your major at Baltimore School for the Arts?
Just take a wild guess.
Theater?
There it is.
Yep.
That's
exactly
what me and
I thought
Yeah.
Theater major. That's how we can act like we like y'all so well.
I feel all the love, Easy. It's like in the room. I bangs with her out the room.
It's genuine.
No, we were a special class down at BSA though.
Yeah.
We actually produced some real giants. Yeah. And especially in Baltimore, we produced some real giants. Big shout out to like the theater department, Donald Hickens.
Yep.
And I mean I could.
And even Mark Steiner. Mark Steiner.
He was my teacher.
I just found out he
left. Tupac.
When he left, he was there my freshman year. So I would have had him 10th grade. And
I had him in 11th grade.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, snap, this dude really knows how to act.
When he left, that was the first year that Maria Broom taught.
Oh, that's right.
So I ended up having Maria. Shout out to Maria Broom.
Absolutely.
Also a wonderful actress.
Denise Diggs. Richie Pilcher.
Tony Sandias, yes.
Baltimore.
It is Baltimore.
Yeah. Baltimore.
It is hugely small.
Yeah.
Claustrophobic
You didn't
to
have Maria Broom at School for the Arts. You ain't nothing.
Right.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
I don't know, Easy, were you there when Jada came through?
Yeah, I was there that day. Actually,
That's so
Jada
crazy.
Pinkett came through the School for the Arts right after she did Jason's lyric.
Yeah, she still had the blonde.
And she had the blonde shortcut.
Yeah.
And this girl named Chanel. I was on my way to class. I didn't really care about Jada Pinkett at the time. I didn't. I was like, whatever. But so this girl named Chanel I was with was like, Easy, go down here with me. We were supposed to go to class, but she was like, we're gonna go late. Cause I want to see her hair. That's all. She just wanted to see Jada Pinkett's hair. So we go down there and we're standing there, and Jada Pinkett like mumbles to her mom. She's like, "I'm sick of these damn kids." And she turned around and was
beautiful.
like, she turned around to us and was like, y'all want a picture or something? And Chanel was like,
no,
I just want to see your hair. And I was
love it.
I don't know what's going on.
Talk about.
100% be more.
She turned around and said, y'all want a picture or something?
Yeah, like
not
we didn't just hear you, yo. Like we just heard you. So Chanel was like, I just want to see your hair. I was like, come on, Easy. And I was just standing there looking stupid.
Okay. All right, then.
Nice hair. Your hair looks nice, though, Jada.
Break a leg.
Look nice. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, it was real.
That was an event.
It was a lot of electricity in the air.
Yeah.
When she came through.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I think somebody screamed out, like, where's Tupac?
It was major. We saw her down at the harbor later, like after school, and I think she was trying to be like incognito. And I don't know if you remember Dawood that used to hang out with.
Yeah, definitely.
Dawood was like, we should just blow her up. And like from across the street, he was just like, Jada!
Oh my God.
Jada! And she was like,
Also Baltimore. Like, what's up,
y'all? That's the reason why Jada don't come back through that often.
I know, probably.
No,
because she doesn't like kids taking pictures of her and looking at her hair.
I don't know.
I mean, she's huge now. Like
yeah,
that was
true.
the beginning of her becoming huge. Because at first she was like, I think she had just been on like A Different World.
Yeah.
And then, done like a couple things. But Jason's lyric was like.
Actually, I saw, what's the brother that played Jason?
Bokeem Woodbine?
No, not him. No.
He wasn't Jason.
No, he wasn't.
It was
Jason.
Alan Payne.
Alan Payne. That's right. He was.
So
Jason.
I'm in the. We go to Fridays up in Towson, and it's a Friday night, and then guess who walks through with just one guy, his homeboy, Alan Payne. So me being the guy that I am, he comes through. He gets a tape on it, like all the ladies, and this was years ago. He still looks the exact same way.
Yeah.
And so all the ladies are like, oh my God, it's Alan Payne. So I was, I at the time was with my wife, and I was like, she was like, it's Alan Payne. I was like, where? I get up. Hey, Alan, what's up, bro? He showed me love. Man, he was the coolest brother I've. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what's going on? I mean, we connected like we knew each other for like many years. It was very. Yeah. It was very, people then looked at me like, you know Alan Payne? I was like,
yeah. We go way back to Friday. Jada, though,
we hang out on Fridays.
I think Jada has probably matured past the I'm sick of these kids place. Have you guys seen the Red Table conversation?
I have seen.
Yeah, I have seen some of those.
Very dope. Very dope. Really dope. It resonates with so many people. She brings in the whole intergenerational vantage point with her mom and her daughter.
Yeah.
And it's so real, like the topics and everything. Like I'm losing my hair, and relationships with friends, and it's dope.
I think she created this platform that is so necessary right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like Jada has always kind of like paved her own path when it comes to media and the messaging that she wants to get out there.
All right, so Jada, if you're listening, we would like to have you on.
Yeah, Jada. Look, let me tell you,
the next podcast guest after Faraji's out of here.
Check this out. I actually reached out to her on Twitter and Instagram. I'm still waiting.
All right, well.
Jada, you owe our friend Faraji a call.
I hit all of the talking points. Hey, Jada, I'm from Baltimore.
I went to BSA.
Hey, I work at an HBCU, Morgan. Hey, Jada, I went to school for the arts, for theater.
Go on.
You know what I'm saying? I love the community. Still waiting.
No response.
Man. I'll probably get something from Will than I would from Jada. He probably sent me one of his inspirational quotes.
No, but what you have to do is be like, hey, Will Smith, I was looking to see if I could speak with Jada.
I'm trying to get in touch with Jada.
I was
Will,
wondering if you could put me in touch
Where's
with Jada.
Right. Thank you for your time. Is Jada around?
Hey, Will, love your work. Was interested in speaking with Jada.
Right. So it's interesting that now we do have like a Will Smith. He kind of has his fifth life?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
on Instagram.
Yo, his Instagram is popping. Yeah, I love his Instagram.
His Instagram. So I don't know, and it's so interesting.
Like, him and Trick Daddy are like my two favorite 90s rapper or like older rapper like Instagrams. Trick Daddy, Gilly the King.
I don't know if it's. I think Plies.
Oh God, I should.
I think Plies.
Plies is so good.
Plies.
But see, Will and Trick give me like the spectrum of like Will is like, zen like whatever, right. And Trick is like, I'm still with the fuck shit. You know what I mean? It's like Trick Daddy is like, ain't nothing changed, Dayton County, bitch. Like, I get like a balance. I love it.
You always need balance.
Yeah.
Will and Jada would support that.
Right. All right, let's get into these stories.
Yep. There's that.
We do have news about Baltimore. I want to get into this first piece that Jezel Noor did. After a murder, a community seeks answers. 20-year-old Rashad Queen was killed in the Edno Gardens neighborhood last month, and it prompted community members to seek answers to the murder epidemic here. So let's check this out.
It was a quiet Saturday night on the block. Then the gunshots erupted. Longtime resident and military veteran Joseph Kane lives across the street from where 20-year-old Rashad Queen was shot by a hail of 25 bullets.
Shots rang out just outside, and immediately told Angel, my wife, get down. The kids were upstairs. They ran downstairs. What is that? Gunshots? Told them to get down as well. It kind of brought back memories, not fond memories, but just memories of just what it looked like or felt like to be in a combat zone, if you will, where just gunshots are going off and or training is happening, and you don't expect it to hear that outside your home in the middle of the night.
Queen's loved ones and community members were devastated by the loss and held a candlelight vigil to commemorate his life.
Have a moment of anger and wanting to do something different, but this is a lifetime journey of us changing Baltimore City and making sure that things like this never happen to anybody else. So I'm asking you today, in honor of Rashad, to not let today just end by you going home and shedding a couple of tears, but continue to come out and work, continue to make a difference, continue to walk upright and be an example for those people who have not seen an example. I ask you to do that, and I ask you to rejoice. Do not cry, but rejoice that Rashad is in a much better place.
Democratic state nominee Mary Washington lives a few blocks from the site of the killing.
We're going to have conflicts. People are going to fight. But the thing is, what we have right now is access to guns, access to deadly weapons, and then also no real ways for people to choose another path. What supports do these families need? Are there housing supports? Are there behavioral health supports? Are the children in those communities, in those households that seem to be the repeat either perpetrators or the survivors of this violence, what supports do they need?
Baltimore is considered one of America's deadliest cities. Over 170 people have been killed already in 2018.
But, you know, this community, for example, is one that's been always organized and active, and how do we push back against that? How do we organize around the systemic issues that cause these type of things? And so you have, like, for me, my wife, we are very active in organizing with education in Baltimore City, being on the PTO or being in PCAB. So I think this community in general is one that has always been active. And how do we get to the systemic, how do we get to the root causes of these things so we don't have these type of issues moving forward?
It's unlikely Rashard Queen's killer will ever be brought to justice. Over the past 10 years, just 1 in 3 city homicides have resulted in an arrest, the Washington Post has found. Neil Franklin is a 34-year veteran Maryland State police officer and former head of training for the Baltimore Police Department.
We've got deplorable clearance rates for the homicides of these young black males and women here in Baltimore City, and kids, by the way, primarily because we don't get, when I say we, the police do not get the information that they need from the citizens. Again, lack of trust. Until we solve the issue of trust between the police and the community, you know, and this rests squarely in the hands of policing. Until we solve that, your clearance rates are going to remain low.
You know, at some point, we have to agree that two things. One, that community members absolutely have to take ownership over what's happening in their communities and not rely solely on police enforcement or law enforcement to set the conditions where this type of thing is not happening in their community. And two, call on the police to do their jobs. Yeah. So
yeah, it's crazy that this came out like the same this piece, we put this piece out the same week that it was released, that only like 30-something% of the Baltimore police officer or the Baltimore police force is even ever on patrol, meaning that 70% of them are either in offices or like, you know, doing something else other than like what they're actually supposed to be doing. Which I think is very illuminating.
I recently found out, I think it's since 1993, 1 in 3 murders in Baltimore have been ended in arrest.
Yep.
Yeah. So the clearance rate,
yeah,
that we're seeing is around 30%, a little bit less than 40% in the city of Baltimore. The thing that got me about this particular story, and my condolences go out to the family of Rashard Queen. I mean, the culture within the hood.
Yeah.
Is the thing that I think we need to kind of key in on. We can have these outside conversations about policing. We could talk about systemic issues. But when we live in certain neighborhoods, and I've lived all over the city, the culture of the hood is the thing that is constantly the piece, the element that I'm confronting. When you walk out your door and you live in a certain neighborhood that has a drug problem, prostitution problem, you have a violence issue. And then on top of all of those systemic issues, you have ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. And I said it on my show, I hate the hood culture. I hate hood culture. Just because the hood is not, it doesn't cultivate life. I mean, the things that we celebrate, the different elements that we celebrate in the hood are the things that are killing us.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, why do we have to have it that way? The culture that we have right now, we are the culture, the people are the culture. We dictate what the norms, the traditions are in the neighborhood. And then to have us be like, man, yeah, my joint was lit because, You know, somebody was shot, and my man was robbed, and I mean, you know, you got chicks. I mean, when you think about it, when you think about the next generation, like what are we essentially passing down to? And I know all of us have been in the school system to realize that when you're looking at a 10-year-old or 11-year-old and they're mimicking certain elements of that culture, you know what I'm saying? Even if you look on social media, a lot of people think it's cute to dress your 5- and 6-year-old boy up like a hustler, you know, like a dope boy. And you like, come on, man, like at the end of the day, that's the future. That's the promise of the next gen from the next generation. Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're going to talk about this later in the show, my conversation with Devin Allen, and he talks about, in many ways, how confined he was without bars around him by the culture.
Absolutely.
How the culture told him what being masculine looked like and what being loving looked like, and how photography allowed him to re-envision for himself and really take a step back and see what was happening in the hood and reject it and be like, nah, I'm not good with that.
Right.
I lost 27 people to murder in the last 3 years. When I see my boy, I'm gonna give him a hug. Right? How do we intentionally push in and address that culture? Baltimore is a city of neighborhoods, and when you think about Gardens Lakeside, it borders Waverly, better Waverly, and where this murder happened in particular, there was another murder previously in the week, same location.
Wow.
And the Ender Gardens Lakeside community, World War I, stone row homes, people live in those homes for 30, 40 years. It is a stable community. But what does stability mean when you can just cross the street into a community where hood culture is pervasive, right? And whose responsibility is it to say, you know what, I need to cross the street?
Yeah.
Because my neighbors deserve the stability of my own 4 square blocks in a way that my children deserve to see the people across the street as human, right? And so there's so much intentionality we need to really press into to disrupt that hood culture. And in many ways, I have this conversation with people where they're like, you know, why is such and such talking about what should happen for people in the hood? It's like, yo, I'm from the hood, but I thought we were talking about community uplift. Am I supposed to still act like I'm in the hood in order to be credible, to talk about how to provide liberation for people still in the hood? So it doesn't make sense, right?
No,
like
it
it's like, you know, so
I mean, I think we can learn a lot by continuing to watch the Baltimore ceasefire. I know I'm always covering it, I know I always shout them out, but really it is an example of, you know, the direction that we should be going in and what we're talking about, because they address it from all of the angles. You know, like it's not one particular thing. You know, it's like, you know, when I was coming up and I wanted to emulate drug dealers, or I wanted to be like the drug dealers, it wasn't because I thought that was cool, or, you know, it was because that's what I was exposed to. And being one of 6 kids and a single mother, honestly, like, I admire drug dealers because I like the way they ate. I'm dead serious. Like, and when I had my little stint of selling drugs, it was because I wanted to be, I was hungry. I wanted to be able to buy food when I wanted to. And I admired watching them come out with their fresh outfits on, and like, I thought the way they leaned forward and ate their pizza so that the sauce didn't drip on there, you know what I mean? I thought that looked cool. And for me, like, I wanted a slice of pizza whenever I wanted to get it, you know what I mean? So when you look at how the Baltimore ceasefire does things, yes, I'm not from the hood, or, you know, I'm not in the hood anymore, but I'm from the hood. And maybe I don't look like them right now, but I know somebody who is listening to them. So let me connect with them, and then we go in together, and they say, yo, Khalilah's good people. It's like, listen, this is what we about to do. We're going to do a block cleanup. We're going to do, you know, expungement. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, like, everybody taking a piece and trying to fix this thing. You know, I think that's you know, one of the
But what
answers.
you just said is so critical, right? Is that building the bridge and like, this is good people. Let's do this thing together. Finding out who those credible voices are, and also there's going to require people to suppress the whole who these people coming in. It's got to be somebody like, chill.
Yeah, you gotta have a liaison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got because these communities are so tight knit and they're so disenfranchised by constantly being disappointed, constantly being let down, constantly being brutalized.
Right.
That they're not really trying to hear nothing other than what's going to get them through that day, what's going to get them through that next day. You know what I mean? And if that's whatever it is, then they're going to go to that option until people start talking otherwise.
I think we have to tap into our own power.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we tend to, underestimate the power that we have as citizens and as a community, because we can't change how Baltimore is. Etna Gardens or any other community in the city of Baltimore, we can change it. We have to want to change it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, I work in the Barclay community, and some of the elements there, what I'm seeing is that, you have people that say, hey, man, I'm trying to, get a job. I'm trying to change my life. Mm-hmm. And you got to act. I ask young brothers and sisters, are you serious? Mm-hmm. Are you for real? Mm-hmm. Because guess what? You can get a job. I mean, this is Baltimore, and even though we have a lot of challenges, you can go to school for free.
Yeah.
From high school to community college.
Now,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so why not take advantage of that?
Yeah.
Why not take advantage of, this is one of the few places that I've been in where even if you have a record, if it's not something really, really crazy or outlandish, you can still get a job.
But to your point, I feel like there's so little access to that kind of information that it is sort of, if nobody else is going to do it, it's up to people in communities to disperse that information. But who in Baltimore knows that you can even go to community college for free? I think it's so few people who actually have access to that information because it's not put out there.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, and see, but you got to figure out what's the spaces that you're in.
Yeah, no,
you know what I'm saying? And when I talk to young people, I always ask them one question: how many of you want to be successful? And they everybody raises their hand. And then I'm saying, okay, then first look at the people around you.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Who are the people around you? Because if you want to be in a certain space 5 years down the road, you have to start planning that process now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't be with your homeboy who's always running the streets, always committing violence, always doing this, and your homegirl, she always in some drama, and then you talking about, I'm going to be successful. That is a very hard thing to break out of. When you are, first, you're the culture of the neighborhood, and now the peer pressure from your closest allies and friends.
And all the pressure from all the structural shit, too. All of the pressure from, how much harder it is to get a job if you're, a young black person in Baltimore, how much harder it is to get access to information about education.
Well, you want to start from the very beginning of that? When I tell people, okay, you want to get a job, it's fine, but you got to wake up 6:30 in the morning and get ready. Getting on the bus. Yeah. Taking 2 buses to a job, that could be a hindrance for some people.
Well, I was just going to say what's embedded in what you're asking, other than who's around you, is do people even know what success looks like?
Come on.
Right?
Come on,
Don. You
Doc.
have people who will be like, I want to be successful, and they see the tail end, but not the pathway. Right? And so it's like, what do you mean I have to get up at 6:30 in the morning to get on the bus? I just asked you if you want to be successful, and you said yes.
Right.
Do you know what that looks like?
Come on.
And I think that, Dharna, is what's hidden from so many people, where they get to the point, right, of being a Rashard. Because there's so many dynamics around whether or not the people who killed him knew him and were looking for him, right? They weren't just busting shots in Edna Gardens Lakeside. If you've been to Edna Gardens Lakeside,
it's not
people are not just busting shots outside of Independence Day, right? So what does it look like? Because then you can say who's around you. Because sometimes that hustler that's around you knows what success looks like, and you don't know what it looks like. So you're seeing them like, I want to be down.
Yeah.
And ride the coattails.
But success is
but I don't see him up at 4 o'clock in the morning making sure his pack is right.
But see, success requires discipline.
Exactly.
And it requires commitment. We've been blessed to have some level of success here, those of us around this table. But that was a discipline. There was a decision. There had to be a conscious decision to be made. Easy, you and I, growing up, we made a decision to go to school for the arts. You know what I'm saying? You know what? I'm going to take when I came out of that institution, my life was changed forever.
Yeah,
you feel me? So it's like, let's get down to the decision making.
Yeah. But this is my point, though. If you are saying you want to be successful, you're surrounded by, I don't want to say certain types of people doing certain things.
Yeah.
And you don't know what success looks like. You don't see that your hustler friend who gets up at 4 to make sure his pack is right, make sure he has these things, and you don't know what success looks like. Maybe you are the hindrance to your hustler friend from being successful because he knows what it takes to be successful, but the people around him are valuing the wrong things.
Right,
so he's doing what he needs to know, what he needs to do.
Those skills are harnessed to, exactly. And I think that it's like occasionally I think that when not you, but when people use these kinds of narratives, it's like it overlooks the amount of skill that it takes to do something like drug dealing can be really hard for people. If you're putting it doesn't mean that you're not a capable person. It means that you maybe don't have the access and the culture around you to show what other things those skills and values could be put into.
Sure. I mean, I think that if you also looking at, the amount of time that you put in, if you spend that much time on the block, you can spend that much time on the job.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying
exactly.
I'm not trying to make it just that easy and black and white, but at the end of
it's definitely not.
It's not that black and white.
I mean, you can get a job and then, you take child support for instance. You know what I mean? If you have child support and you're on the street and you're used to bringing in this certain amount of cash, and then you go get a job and then they find out, you owe child support, and the next thing you know, you're only getting, $200-300 every 2 weeks. It doesn't make it doesn't add up.
No,
the
it
math doesn't work. So you know what I mean. So the natural thing to do is resort back to what you know. You know what I mean. So there's so many issues I think need to be addressed, and we could spend the next hour. But that was only our first story.
But I think actually a lot of that is a really good segue into the next story, which is a piece that Khalilah did. Because not only are you facing sort of often sort of violent conditions within your own community, but you're facing violence that's at a structural level too. And so, Khalilah, you did this great report about the disproportionate amount of discipline and violence, really, in a way that Black girls face in schools, and sort of the steps that are being taken to dismantle that school to prison pipeline that we hear about so often. So let's take a look at this, and maybe we can bring back this conversation.
Yeah. Yep. As a new school year approaches, the Real News Network will continue to explore the intersections of equity, race, and access to opportunities for quality, safe, and supportive public school environments. In early summer 2018, we attended a town hall event hosted in partnership with Not Without Black Women, the University of Maryland School of Law, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in advance of the release of the LDF's new study, Our Girls, Our Future.
Through our research, which was both statistical analysis, we collected information and data from the school district and the Department of Juvenile Services, and from the Baltimore School Police Force, and then also through qualitative research. So we spoke to young women who are in schools in Baltimore. We spoke to teachers, administrators, parents about how they were experiencing the school system. And then we wrote a report that found that there is a need for increased investment in the educational opportunities of Black girls in Baltimore, that there is an over-reliance on school police, an over-reliance on exclusionary discipline, and by that I mean suspensions, expulsions, and different ways of pushing girls out of school at the point where they need to be pulled in.
Students who are suspended and expelled are more likely to drop out. And if you're more likely to drop out, well, if you drop out, you're more likely to engage the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system.
The two organizations held this discussion during Say Her Name Week 2018, a national week of action targeted at ending violence against all Black women, girls, and femmes.
Not Without Black Women is supporting the release of this report because we are concerned with Black women and girls in particular in Baltimore and around the education system, especially after the 2015 Baltimore uprising. Not Without Black Women is a social and political movement of women that advocates for the agency and autonomy of Black women's voices, bodies, and freedoms. And so what we've come to learn over the past couple of months is that investing in our youth has become one of the most important issues in Baltimore City. And so our goal is to apply both a gender and sexual oppression lens to our work around how we reform or recreate education in Baltimore. And so that is going to be one of our main goals of working on for this year.
Authored by attorney Kara McClellan, with data analysis from Dr. Megan Gall, the report shares both anecdotes and data related to the experiences of Black girls in Baltimore City schools. That in addition to school discipline pushing students towards incarceration, young women tend to get pushed to other forms of confinement, such as human trafficking, teen pregnancy, and homelessness, for very subjective reasons.
What we found was that over a quarter of the things that Black girls are suspended and expelled for, focusing specifically on suspensions though, has to do with defiance, disturbance, disrespect, and threatening behavior, these things that are subjective terms and that get applied a lot more to the behavior of Black girls, whereas when it may be the same behavior and their counterparts of other races don't get those labels and don't get that punishment.
In recent years, more reporting on school pushout of Black girls has been surfaced by advocates and scholars, seeking to ensure those stories aren't lost amidst the heavy emphasis on outcomes for boys.
For us, it creates a barrier because there's so many politics in the middle of the work that needs to be done. There's too many people that are in positions that don't need to be in positions that are making the work that we do very difficult.
We reached out to Dr. Monique Morris, a premier scholar on the issue of school pushout of Black girls and the author of Pushout, The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools, who offered her position that safety in schools is co-constructed, which requires young women and girls to have agency in the process.
One of the administrators I spoke with put very well was that he felt that girls need opportunities for self-expression and that a lot of times the behaviors they're being punished for because they don't have an outlet to express themselves or just even an opportunity to be heard or listened to. And so one of the recommendations we had in terms of improving the school environment was to provide opportunities for Black girls to have voice within school, to provide curriculums where Black girls can see themselves and where creative thinking is developed. So to make sure that people of color, women, LGBTQ people are represented in the curriculum to connect back to the experiences of girls and to help develop the critical thinking and so that there can be that availability for social discussions in class instead of simply regurgitating information. In terms of the improving the environment, we also talked about addressing trauma within schools so that when girls are acting out and it's because of social issues that they're struggling with, that is treated as what it is as opposed to just simply misbehavior.
What's interesting about the work with girls of color is I really have to credit our community partners because when we took a look across the district, most of the more successful and robust programming is happening as a result of different community leaders or community citizens who are putting together groups of young girls and young women actually to come together. So even our Teacher of the Year this year, one of her biggest contributions is the establishment of her Queendom program, which is really around having a place for young girls of color, young Black girls specifically, to be able to find out what makes them them, how to self-advocate, what it means to actually have aspirations beyond just what they might be experiencing now. We have a program called GEMS, which one of our school police officers, who we've recognized many times for that work, and she did that out of her frontline work with young girls in the city. So one of the challenges we have is thinking through how do we scale up this high quality work. But most of, I would say, the strongest work is occurring as a result of these efforts. Our work as the school district is really now saying how do we more strategically target those partnerships in the areas where we see the greatest need.
All right, so first and foremost, I definitely want to distinguish for people school push out and school to prison pipeline. And when we talk about confinement, again, girls are confined in ways that many times boys are not, right? And when you're pushed into human trafficking, because when you get sent home, you don't turn to drug dealing, you turn to sex trafficking or sex work. Because somebody turned you out. They see you on the corner every day when you're supposed to be in school. In their mind, it's like, this is a target for me. They're not making good choices. Let me put them in this situation. Or, you know, you're too disrespectful at school. We're saying to young men, use your voice, right?
Right.
Engage, be a part of the solution. And then we say to girls, shut up.
Yeah.
Stop lifting your voice up. And the data shows, you can see this from the U.S. Department of Education's Civil Rights Data Collection, that girls are oftentimes put in a position where black girls, the data is also problematic for First Nations girls, but black girls, their bodies are criminalized, right? Yeah. You know, who told you to have those hips? Go home because your uniform is too tight.
Yeah.
Again, the disrespect factor, but also sometimes an inability to see their challenges in the face of the challenges black boys are facing, right? We saw this ongoing mantra about save our boys, support our boys. Our boys are disparately being impacted. All true. But there's not a reason to segregate the conversation by gender. And it had been for a good long while. So this report lifts up, you know, a lot of the challenges that black girls are facing in Baltimore and solutions to that. And what I love about the solutions shared in the report and from scholars who've been doing this work for some time is that voice, making sure we center girls' voices and allow them to be drivers of the process in their own education and able to say, you know, here's how I feel when you tell me that I'm being rude, when I really just wanted to let you know that I thought it was unfair. You didn't sign me up for AP, but you signed him up for AP.
Right.
You know, it's wild because we have our kids in these systems, as you said, Dharna, that start tracking them into jail or confinement. And in the case of girls, that push out is not necessarily into jail, although we see the rapid growth of young women in the juvenile justice system and being incarcerated. But it's this track of, okay, we see you thriving over here. We need to continue to suppress you, right? Whether it's your voice or your ability to access high quality education, we're going to continue to push you down and demand that you conform until you find yourself in a place where it's my job to control you.
Right.
So.
And you're right. I misspoke. It's not even like it's not necessarily like you're even being pushed into prison or jail. It's like the same kinds of confines can be put on you. Even
teen
if you're,
pregnancy.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so many other sort of issues that you can face and challenges you can face. So
I think that you know when you talked about Khalilah in terms of young girls' voices, now more than ever, I see there's a huge attack on black women, especially young black women, psychological attacks. Emotional, mental attacks, just because, you know, I think people already said, okay, we worked on black men. Now we have to you know, teach these young girls who we want them to be. But the independence, you know, that whole, you know, in hip hop, we went through that phase of all sisters are independent, right? But it was independence outside of, oh, I don't need a man. You know what I mean? But then now we're in this place of like, and I don't want to use the sister as an example, but she exemplifies something like a Cardi B type of thinking. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you don't need to, the best way to get through life is to use your assets. You know what I mean? And not really pushing, you know, the intelligence out there. Right. You know what I mean? And it's so unfortunate because, again...
And it's hidden, right?
Because
when you watch her, what you see is someone intelligently navigating systems.
Yeah.
But what's being promoted is not necessarily how savvy she is.
I was actually just going to say that. Like, the fact that Cardi B is kind of a marketing genius in some ways is so diminished because what you see, exactly what you see on, like, a poster is, like, her outfit.
But see, you can't... and that's the thing. That's exactly the thing because... if you're talking to a 12-year-old girl, 13, 14-year-old girl, she may not always be able to decipher the two things that what you hear on wax it's not necessarily the woman that you see out in the public. You know what I mean? Cardi is pushing but you're right. Behind the scenes, she's making deals. She's creating her own pathway to success, but that's not the part that's being emphasized.
But see, I don't think that that's any different than, you know, when we were coming up with Tupac. You know what I'm saying? When Pac was alive, we loved Pac because he was talking that street shit. You know what I mean? He was talking, you know, he was talking gang and, like, you know, riding on his enemies and all that stuff. We didn't really see the intelligent Pac, the activist Pac, until after he passed, and we started to reflect on, you know what I mean, on who he was.
Yeah.
But like, nah, man, my favorite tracks from Pac was when he was dissing Biggie and them, Hit 'Em Up, you know what I mean? All the ignorant tracks, not Dear Mama, not you know, not Smile for Me or Tears or none of them was my favorite tracks, you know what I mean? But that's always been with hip hop. You know, the image is one thing, and then you have to have I think young people have to have people around them to explain. Like I had older people who explained to me how heavy Pac was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, yo, this brother, like, you know, really explained to me like what he was representing, the fact that he came from Black Panthers and stuff like that. And it's the same with Cardi B. I think, you know, I think she's awesome. You know what I mean? I love what she's doing because it doesn't really take that much to look deep and see her intelligence and what she's doing. It's just using the flash or the, you know what I mean, to get the attention, and but still show people.
Faraji is saying though, because I also reject people who are like, you know, you're a hater if you don't like Cardi.
Oh yeah, no.
And it's like, wait a minute though, why does everything have to be, you know, YOLO?
Right, love it or hate it.
Right. It's like, nah. I think the sister is dope for making it do what it do with what she has.
Right.
However, you're not also going to tell me this is somebody that you would chill with, knowing my circle of friends.
I would
like,
totally chill with Cardi
You're
B
playing yourself.
day.
Now, easy, I know you will.
I'm rap shit on the low.
But nah, I mean, it's like people saying, you know, do whatever you want. This whole, you know, do you philosophy is not real life. That's not civilization.
Well, even okay, let's take it a step further. It's not conducive for us to have a do you philosophy when we've been expressing that philosophy for so long, and look at the nature of our communities. Like you know, there is, like, young women today need to tap into their own power. Yeah. And that's what we're not seeing. We're not seeing young women tapping it. I mean, look, your body shape, your face, how you dress, you fresh to death on Instagram and Facebook and all of that stuff. But you got to tap into your internal power.
Except I do think that people are tapping into their power and then they get smacked down for being Black feminists. Or they get smacked down for being
too loud.
So there's a range, because I do see Black women saying, I am reclaiming my time. You refuse to see my power, and now I'm not worried about if you do or you don't.
Right.
And so there's got to be a meeting there where we don't slip off the cliff of, well, Cardi B, and not also lift up, you know, hey, did y'all know Maxine Waters was this dope all the time?
All the time.
Like, been dope.
Right.
Angela Rye.
Right. Have people like Angela Rye and other young women who are okay with
Khalilah Harris.
Khalilah,
Dr. Khalilah Harris.
And then I think,
but being okay with not only not conforming, but being unapologetically Black women, using their intersections of feminine, or excuse me, of woman, Black, alive as an act of resistance. But our girls, to your point, when certain people are lifted up, miss that whole, again, it's what does success look like? That path, right? And then when you have schools saying to them, be less Black woman and I'll accept you.
Yeah.
Right. And we also have to be mindful.
That's interesting.
We have to be mindful of which elders are communicating what to our children.
Right.
Because I also find myself pushing up against people who are teaching kids to conform.
Well, a couple of things. There's a couple of things. One is, you know, I had a great conversation with Miss Kathy Hughes one time on the show. And one of the things that she mentioned was that our culture is being picked like cotton. That's what shared with her. And she was making that point because our talent nowadays, I mean, just as much as you have a Cardi B in the hip hop world, they pulled a Tiffany Haddish, right? Or they might pull somebody else. And it's like now it's whoever the industry wants us to kind of focus on, show love to, you know what I mean? Like just like we talked about Jada, but Jada is not getting, she's not on a Tiffany Haddish level at this moment, but she's been speaking about things for a very long time. So we all gotta be cognizant of the fact that they are cherry picking who they want us to kind of conform to and connect with, right? But then the other part is you talked about was, you know, this network of women. I'm always impressed to see so many Black women who support one another. You know, like my wife is a teacher, my sister-in-law is a teacher. I mean, these are young women who are deciding to take on some very real challenges in the classroom. And it's like, that's the type of thing that a lot of these young sisters need, because I think sisters just lose that sight of, you know what, who can I really go to? Is mentoring, we talk about mentoring for Black boys. But is mentoring for Black girls, is that as strong? Is what's that? And when I listened to your piece, Khalilah, I didn't know whether that was an option, you know?
So Dr. Santelises talked about it towards the end, and this is a part one of what will be a two-part series. The next part is going to talk more about student Miranda rights being denied by the Board of School Commissioners and just the overall disparities in school discipline in Maryland. But Dr. Santelises in the next piece will lift up more of what she was saying about solutions that she's seeing coming right out of community. Right. And she talked about school police officer who has a program called, I think it was GEMS. And then the teacher of the year also had this amazing mentoring program. I have another piece coming out that's also a part two about Afro-Latina culture. And one of my mentees, Valencia Clay, who taught for me, she took a group of girls in her Blossoms mentoring program to Dominican Republic this summer. And so there are excellent mentoring programs out there for young women.
That's what I'm saying.
And again, though, it's a matter of, do we see it? Will we acknowledge it? Will we support it? Right? People want to pour. People have poured millions of dollars into programs for boys and men of color. But we see now, like the Miss Foundation for Women, shifting their entire portfolio to support development for women of color.
I mean, like for example, we talk about. I mean, if you look at like for the month of September, there was this big talk about Black women being on all the covers of major magazines for the fall.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
11
I'm here for
all the
Black
Condé
women.
Nast ones.
Vogue and on every major magazine for the September issue, a Black woman is shown.
Nice.
And at this point, we got to look at it. You know, the question has to be asked: is it about realizing the beauty of Black women, or is it about the fact that you have a magazine industry that's dying, and then have decided
and now
we're going to tap into the dollars.
We're going to tap into the dollars of Black women who are the biggest consumers to try to get them to buy into our brand.
I mean, that's deep. How capitalism will have you thinking that it's woke when it's really trying to keep you asleep.
Right.
You know,
I like
look,
that.
you see all the Black women here?
Right.
Buy our magazine.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Because either way, I'm excited about it. September is me and Beyonce birthday month. So.
Oh Lord.
So I'm here for it.
Did he switch to Virgo?
Virgo season is approaching.
Like, wait a minute. We're out here being serious. And me and Faraji are like
right. I mean, like, Virgos are the only ones that every time it's Virgo season all year. And I mean, man, there were other people that were born.
Come on,
There
man.
were other people that were born.
Beyonce is a Virgo, which you can't argue.
Okay, we got that. Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. Easy.
All right, we got more stories. These next two, we're gonna play these two back to back because it's a part one and part two that Stephen and Taya did, and this is actually one of the hot button issues right now here in Baltimore. Last weekend, Baltimore City police officer was caught on tape attacking a man in his neighborhood on his block. And this is the Baltimore Police Department out of control? And it's going to be followed by a piece, part two. Commissioner says fellow officer did not have to stop the cop beatdown. Check this out.
I'm standing right here on the blood of another victim of police brutality. But the question that we're asking is the Baltimore Police Department capable of reform?
I was sitting on the steps and I was stopping you. For what? You touched me. Oh, what the fuck? Yo, what the fuck, yo?
It really shocked me when I seen how they did that young man, regardless black, white, green, Chinese, it doesn't matter. And they talk about Black Lives Matter. Come on.
They witnessed yet another beatdown by Baltimore City Police. Residents of the East Baltimore community who were there when this yet-to-be-identified officer punched 26-year-old Deshaun McGreer without provocation.
I think he needs to take a stress test, really, because he's taking all his anger out on us.
The Real News visited the spot where it occurred, and there they pointed to blood that poured from McGreer's mouth, the result of injuries sustained from the attack. They say that once again, the police have violated the rights of the community.
I mean, you're supposed to protect us, you know, supposed to look after us, and you mean to tell me you're coming out and you're attacking us?
Policing will not be reformed in our lifetime, says the attorney who is representing another victim of Baltimore City police brutality.
My preliminary review of particularly the public video is extremely disappointing to me. I don't think that there was any room for the activity that I saw on that, and it is extremely disturbing.
It was a critical moment during the hastily called press conference after this video surfaced showing a brutal assault by a Baltimore City police officer. It was the city's top cop trying to answer questions about an unprovoked beatdown that has gone viral.
With the consent decree and the scrutiny of the federal government, how can this stuff be happening when you've got federal monitors watching the police department? What is going wrong in the department? Where is the breakdown here?
Well, I mean, there shouldn't be a breakdown, and that's why I'm so disturbed about this.
The officer has since resigned, and Interim Commissioner Tuggle has criticized his actions. But during the back and forth with reporters, one particular query stood out, a question about the second officer seen in the video. Commissioner Tuggle was asked by the Real News if that officer had any obligation to intervene, and his answer reveals much about the power of American policing. Commissioner Tuggle said the officer was concerned for his safety and had an obligation to protect himself.
There were a number of things going on in the video. Now let me talk specifically about the public video. As you noticed, there weren't any strikes on the part of that officer, but there were people in the immediate area and approaching that situation with sticks in their hand. So he had an obligation not only to contain the situation that he had in front of him, but he had an obligation to keep himself safe. That's hugely important.
Not the victim, Deshaun McGreer, an answer he defended when questioned by the Real News.
Commissioner, are you saying that he had no obligation to stop that officer from beating the suspect?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying.
Could you clarify that, please?
I'm saying that given the opportunity to stop it and protect himself at the same time, he had the opportunity. He had an obligation to do that.
But later, McGreer's attorney Warren Brown said that the notion a police officer could stand by and watch a brutal assault is ludicrous.
If he had seen someone go after my client the way his colleague went after my client, he would have intervened. He would have made an arrest right then and there. The fact that his colleague had the uniform on and is his colleague should not have stood in the way of him trying to intervene and prevent the carnage that we witnessed on video.
That the officer's failure to act was a sign that the future for police reform here in Baltimore was dim.
I mean, listen, you know that the federal government, they have this consent decree, and Judge Bradar and these guys are overseeing what's going on. You know that Marilyn Mosby has no reluctance to prosecute police officers. You know the ubiquitous nature of cell phones. So why would you engage in such brutal actions on the streets of Baltimore? Yeah.
I mean, is this police department at a tipping point now where it's beyond the ability to reform it?
I don't think it'll be reformed in our lifetimes. All right, all of us are old enough to. I think we're going to get. We won't see it in our lifetime. I think it's going to be the next generation that may well see it.
Brown said the officer had harassed his client and had escalated tensions during frequent contacts.
Instead, what you have is an officer that is former officer that zeroed in on this individual and would not let up. And it's not, I mean, we see this oftentimes. It's just rare that it rises to this level and is recorded in the manner that it was.
He didn't attempt to say, you know, come on, fellow officer, stop this. Don't do this. No, to me, it was like he was encouraging him, if you ask me.
That this shows a culture of hostility towards the community that residents who witnessed the attack said is business as usual.
You cannot be out here going around just beating people because you have problems at home with your wives or family members or whatever.
They also believe the officer should have intervened, and that the mayor needs to start holding police accountable, or real change will remain forever out of reach.
Our mayor, Catherine Pugh, needs to step up and get on top of that. Get a good commissioner that's going to sit there and fight for us in our community.
Heavy stuff, once again.
Real heavy.
It is.
You know what's crazy? When I first saw this video on Instagram, it's funny how we can become numb to stuff.
Yeah.
I saw the video and I was like, damn, another video. And then I went on about my day. Did not for a second think
it was Baltimore.
Either it was Baltimore or like this is about to go viral or this is crazy, until I come back to my phone and it's like more people posting the video. And then I really sat and I watched it and I'm like, wow. This is so problematic on so many levels. Like, you know, I mean, first of all, I'll never forget being on tour and doing a show in Montana, Billings, Montana, right? And I remember the white guy, I got off stage and was outside, and one of the white guys that was at the show, he says to me, he said, "Where you say you're from Baltimore?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Wow, you know, that's the first time I ever saw a black man arresting another black man." And like, I didn't know whether or not to get offended or laugh. I kind of like nervously laughed because I figured it's probably true. Like, Montana is white as hell. He's probably like, you know what I mean? But I mean, these are two black men, you know what I mean, on camera, and the world constantly gets to watch us, you know, go at this. But then these two brothers are operating within a white supremacist system that's designed to do exactly what he did to this young man. And it happens all the time. As a matter of fact, the same officer was on tape about a month or two ago doing the same thing, and that video didn't go viral.
Yeah. I think that the Baltimore Police Department is very impressive at continually showing us how, like, these sort of, like, buzzwordy small reforms are never going to be effective unless there's some sort of big, like, Khalilah, you shared a great article this week showing that, you know, there's not really a statistical difference in the number of the black cops who are arresting black folks than white cops, or assaulting.
In fact, black cops are more likely to arrest black people because they are typically assigned to black communities that are over police.
And then, and again, like in the GTTF, we saw folks who are from the community, cops who are from the community, engaging in just like horrid behaviors. So again, it's not, you can't just have people who are of and from the community without doing so. Like, I feel like the Baltimore Police Department over and over again just shows us, like, well, you can't just do that. That's not going to work. You can't just do that. That's not going to work. You have to have some sort of overhaul. And it's just like,
I mean, you got this officer who's constantly harassing and engaging with this guy on a regular basis because he knows he can. You know what I mean? And he feels like he can get away with it. You take Detective Danny Herschel, who was a part of the Gun Trace Task Force and got indicted and all that. You know, you go back a year, 2, 3 years, and there's this whole record of him harassing Young Moose, a local Baltimore rapper. You know what I mean? And like, you know, constantly just obsessed with messing with this young man. You know what I mean? Like, and you're not a detective. You're not assigned to, you know, break up some conspiracy ring with this brother. It's you going into the community.
Of the Rap Patrol.
Yeah, it's like, it's you intentionally going into community to pick a fight.
Yeah.
You know, and you can see it in this video. Like, the guy's like, for what? You know what I mean? I don't know what they were talking about. But
I think what's most significant about this particular case is this is a new officer. So when you talk about a systemic change that has to happen, the system made him feel immediately, he's not 10 years on the force, 15 years on the force. Immediately, the system made him feel like you can do this without impunity.
Yeah.
You can do this and no one is going to
This is what you're supposed to do.
Accountable. Yeah. This is what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And so the article that I shared with the team really was saying that people hijack this concept of bad police when it is the system that is poisoned.
Well, I think to add to that, a couple of things. One is Arthur Williams, the former officer. His attorney said, well, Mr. Williams, he was awarded in the academy. He kind of graduated at the top of his academy. He's a pillar in the community. He's in high school, he was a football star. Mr. Williams also.
Sorry, how does that make you a pillar in their community?
I mean, he was just trying to create this other new narrative about Arthur Williams. And it's like, okay, so he was only on the force for a year and some change. And it's like, how do you get out of the academy, at the top of the academy, already making those decisions? And I think that's the part of this that's most disturbing, is that we often, and this is, again, we got to put this out there, this is not for all police officers, but I think that if you're a police officer, whether it's in Baltimore or wherever, and you go into a black community, guess what, bruh? You are going to be hated on. Let's just keep it real. You know what I'm saying? You have to prepare for that certain level of hostility. And some people take it to it, well, I'm different. We don't see that. When I was pulled over, and I've been pulled over many times, it's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, you the same one that didn't bust me in my mouth versus you. Nobody sees it like that. And then the other part of it is that, you as the police department, you create this wall. You create this brotherhood. Like, if you see one, you see all. And so now you want us to nitpick and individualize officers.
Right.
No,
now it's on us.
Now it's on us to figure out which officer is officer friendly and which officer is also kick your ass. Like, it's how you're supposed to do that. And the other disturbing part about this is the fact that we're so emotional. One of my callers said we're emotionally exhausted. Like you mentioned, like, oh, okay. Kind of this apathetic, like, oh, all right.
I'm just like, I'm tired of seeing it.
We're tired of seeing it. But I mean, the crazy part is Deshaun McGrady, the victim, 26 years old. Arthur Williams, 25 years old.
Wow.
So so Arthur Williams, the two things, you said it best, Easy. Here you have a black man in the streets. He made one set of decisions to get him there. Then you have a black police officer who made another set of decisions to get him there. And then you just see this clash. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, you can't tell me as officers. My man Larry Lancaster, a comedian from Baltimore, he made the point. He said when he was in that law enforcement field, he said they don't teach you to love your blackness. They don't teach you about all. They teach you us against them.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happens when we fight. If let's just take this 25 and 26-year-old man. Let's take the uniforms off of them. Let's put them both on the basketball court, right? Around a bunch of other brothers, right? They get to fighting. What is every brother in that situation doing? Trying to break them up.
Break them up.
But in that situation, they're not looking at each other as brothers. So now you have this other officer, and this is when we start talking about the systemic issues, the problem. You got this other officer just standing there and letting it happen, because from their position with that uniform on, these are not people that we're dealing with. These are not our brothers.
No.
These are animals in the street that we don't have to respect or acknowledge or anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this whole, this crap about people standing around with sticks, nobody was threatening them. There's one person in there with a broom.
With a broom.
Right.
And
who was sweeping?
And he was actually sweeping.
You have a gun, you have a taser, you have mace.
Right.
And come on, and come on, let's be for real. Like, you see an officer beating somebody.
Yeah.
So what do you expect to do?
Yeah.
Like people like, oh, there's some guys from, and there was nobody coming from the hills of East Baltimore. Come on,
and
bro.
you could hear on the sound that the brothers were like, yo.
They're like, yo,
they're telling him, don't do nothing.
Yeah,
like we got this on, and that's a whole other conversation because I don't even want to get into that.
I mean, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, the police department is out of control. And I think, Dharna, you said it best. There's this kind of like, well, we're going to just kind of keep rolling through. Nothing to see here, folks. Like, no, this thing is falling apart. And I mean, at the end, on a very fundamental level where you can even have law-abiding citizens feeling a certain way about the police. Dharna, you work here, you do all of this research, you do the reporting, but if the cop pull up behind you, now you feel a certain way. And Dharna's not no threat to no officer. Somebody come. I mean, the point is that fundamentally, this is a huge breakdown outside of the consent decree, outside of all of that, the federal monitoring and everything. Like on a human level, this is a breakdown. You should not be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect you.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And at the end of the day, if you are a police officer, I get it. It's a challenging job. But nobody told you to pick that job.
And I feel like
if you have an attitude problem, if you can't deal with people, if you're not cool under very, very intense moments, find another job.
Yeah, because I feel like part of your job too as a police officer, if you're assigned to a community, is to make sure that community has a relationship with you where you don't feel threatened by onlookers in an instance like that. I mean, I don't know what he thought was going to happen if he pulled his fellow officer off of this man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if anything, people in the community going to see that and appreciate you for trying to de-escalate the situation. But he's doing nothing.
It's funny, you look at his body language, it's almost like he was frozen.
Like he didn't know what to do.
No, he didn't know what to do.
Like his humanity was conflicting against his policehood. His humanity and his policehood were in conflict. It was like,
what's going on?
It's the basketball court example. Like, I need to break this up. I can't break this up. I'm police. I need to break this up. Right. You see him there like...
He finally gets in at the tail end of the altercation, like a very weak. Yeah. Come on, man. Come on, like hitting him on the. Yeah. This dude is wailing on him full strength, right? First thing you see that the brother's not even fighting back.
Yeah.
So like after the first couple of hits, like what's going on? What's going on? He didn't even pull him off into the point of, hey man, what's going on? Like check yourself, check yourself.
Right.
Like he didn't do none of that. It was like. You just like, bruh, like what are you doing? And then there's no way. Here's the long-term impact. There's no way you're going to be able to go back into that community.
Right.
Yeah.
So guess what? Now the next officer who's assigned to that neighborhood,
they got to deal with that.
They got to deal with that. Now, so what? So when you go into that neighborhood, now you gonna act like, come on, man, it's just me. Yeah. I ain't the same. Right. You are the same. That's the very nature of policing. You want us to see you as all one people, one officer. And that's going to be very, very hard when you have people who have been oppressed and terrorized and who feel like they're living in a colony. One of my listeners said it's like the police. My man talked about it's like the police is an occupying force.
Yeah.
And the cities and the communities of Baltimore, we live in colonies.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been seeing some good research coming out about how to disrupt exactly what we've been talking about here. And some of it includes in the academy teaching new police about how the history of policing in this country came to pass.
Sure.
And as a part of slave patrols, and as a part of, or having forces where they would leave work, take off their blue shirt, and put their hood on their head.
We know that history.
And we know that history.
Right.
And so to put that perspective in, also as a part of, you need to make sure you have a stance of authority that balances what your role is and allows you to see the people in front of you as, like you said, I can't decide if you're officer friendly today because my DNA tells me you're here to control me and to oppress me.
Let me add to this. The fact of we have to keep this in the conversation of an implicit bias. You know what I'm saying? And even among black people, we have biases. I had whiteness scholar Robin DiAngelo on my show, and one of the things she said, black people can't be racist. And I'm gonna put that out, and I agree with her. We could be prejudiced, but we can't be racist because we don't have no system to back that attitude. Right. But the fact is that we do have prejudice against one another, right? Yeah. And we express this in a very, very kind of like comical way. Chris Rock did it best. You got black people, then you got the N-word, right? You see what I'm saying? But there are certain prejudices and biases that we have, right? Even in Baltimore, you're from down the hill, I'm from up the hill.
You from over east,
you from over east, I'm from over west. Yeah. You're from the city, I'm from Randallstown. You know what I'm saying? So we have these biases, and I don't know if they can go that far and that deep in the training, but we got to keep in mind that these officers carry biases, and I'm speaking of black officers. If you've seen, and Larry mentioned this, if you've seen the worst of your people each and every day, that is going to create a certain bias. And I'm not saying that to defend, but I'm saying we do need to keep in mind that we all need to check our biases. On, okay, if I see Easy walking down the street as a black man, and the last time I saw a black man that looked like Easy, he was robbing me, I'm not going to be, and Easy might be like, what's up? And I'll be like, man, what's up with you? What you trying to do?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that goes into the issue, too, of mental health with police officers. I always bring this up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because especially in a city like Baltimore, when it gets hot, you know, you take one shift, you know what I mean, of like the first warm day. And I had this encounter before with an officer where I had to tell him, like, yo, I'll just call another officer. Because I knew that day they were having, you know, a lot of shootings in the area, you know what I mean? We called them about something minor. He didn't like the way, I didn't like the way they were responding. He reached for his gun, and I'm on my porch, like, trying to get a police report filled out. You know, and at that point I told him, I said, you know what? You had a rough day today. You know what I mean? We're just going to call somebody else. You know what I mean? And then he calmed down and realized, oh, snap, like I was about to take this to another level. And I saw him weeks later, and he thanked me for that, you know what I mean? But he thanked me for recognizing his humanity in that moment. And a lot of times I think that we take for granted that these officers are just people, you know what I mean? And they're constantly in these stressful situations. We don't know what their shift was like the day before. We don't know we always know about the murders that happen, but we don't know which officer responded. We don't know which officer is walking around after seeing somebody's brain blown out last night. You know what I mean? Like, so there's so many layers to this, man, you know, and it's an unfortunate story, but I think this next piece is a lot more lighthearted. It's appropriately titled Black Boy Joy, which is one of my recent favorite terms, you know what I mean? Every time I see Faraji, he got Black Boy Joy. He got the big smile always, ever since high school, man. That same smile, you know what I mean? Black Boy Joy. My man Devin Allen.
Yeah.
Khalilah, you interviewed this brother. He became famous, I guess, after Freddie Gray, and his photos being on Time magazine. He's got a book out. A Baltimore boy. Positive,
spread joy all over the world.
Spread joy, a positive example of what can come out of Baltimore.
Yeah, it was a good interview. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
All right, I'm here with Devin Allen, one of Baltimore's finest, world-renowned photographer, produced an amazing book, A Beautiful Ghetto. Welcome, Devin.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at The Real News. So we're here today. I just want to talk to you about, you know, your vision for Baltimore, the work you've been doing with young people to develop their skills in the arts, and just where we can expect you to go next. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's cool. I'm down. Let's go.
All right, so let's start with the kids. You are working with young people on a project called Through Their Eyes. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Through Their Eyes is it's not really, I don't know what it is yet.
Okay.
You know, it was just my reaction to, you know, becoming an artist in the city where I come from. I didn't know any photographers, and the fact that I went from being an aspiring, you know, photographer to cover Time magazine, with all that attention and all that like social media power that was behind me at that time, I wanted to start a program. It's like, if I can end up on the cover of Time magazine, that shows how powerful I am. But imagine if it was like 10 more Devin Allens with me while I was shooting this, and we all would be, you know, in these magazines and controlling this narrative. So I was like, got the time cover in May, let me use this attention, started a GoFundMe, even the creative GoFundMe donated $1,000 to it. Wow. And then Russell Simmons gave me a $20,000 grant, which DeRay worked through, and Michael Skolnick helped with, and I've been doing it for 3 years. You know, it's something that, for me, is just me passing on everything that I gain and then passing it on, and not just letting the knowledge die inside my head or not. You know, because I've gone places that where I come from, you know, is not promised.
Or expected, right?
Or expected.
So talk a little bit about, you know, what you see in the young people you work with when they're able to look through their eyes and take a look and capture Baltimore.
I'm jealous of my kids because I started photography at 20. I got my first camera in 2013. I was around 24, you know, and I got a time cover at 26, turning 27. And when I look at these kids, it's like, wow. Like, once they learn the little, just like, oh, because I don't teach them off the bat. You know, like when I come and I work with them, it's just building a relationship. And then they want to take pictures, and when they can't get the picture, and that's when I come in with the technical stuff. And when they finally understand aperture and ISO, these kids are unstoppable. They can outshoot some of the greatest because their imagination is just like effortless.
And unbound, I guess.
Yes, and their perspective, you know, being from the inner city, being from West Baltimore, documenting and trying to understand your own situation, you know, is the greatest journalism of all time.
And so you have a book, A Beautiful Ghetto. What are future plans you have for documenting the experience of communities like the one you're from in West Baltimore and the one I'm from in Flatbush, Brooklyn? What are your future goals for documenting the lived experiences of people like you and me?
My biggest thing is like, I don't want to get put into a position where like you become successful and they put you in this space where you become a gatekeeper. And it's like now people have to go through you and you have to validate them. And that's not what I want to be. So my biggest thing is like, how can I make sure that kids know about Gordon Parks, they know about Robert Houston, who is from East Baltimore, they know about Tony Barboza and Jamel Shabazz. How can I take the culture that people wasn't paying attention to, those black photographers, and then apply that and then teach kids to inspire to be the next Devin Allen, the next Jamel Shabazz, or, you know, the next Gordon Parks. So it's like, at a certain point in time, as I get older, I'm going to become disconnected because I can't be outside all day because, you know, it becomes dangerous sometimes, you know, document stuff where you still have a history. So for me, I want to move further and explore other things in the world and try to digest the world. But I want to make sure that everything that I've learned, everything that I've gained that Baltimore gave to me and built me to be, that I can apply that and teach it to younger kids to, you know, fill that void when I am gone.
How important is it that young people have access to the arts?
It's very important. It's life-saving because the thing is that art helps you digest the rest of the world. So if you know, for me, art helps me deal with my issues. Like I suffer from depression. I didn't know what anxiety is. I was going to have, oh, that's what anxiety is, because they don't educate us on these things. Oh, this is post-traumatic stress from seeing people get shot or burying my friends. But art helps me digest that and then regurgitate it, which also takes a pressure off. You know, it helps me heal also. So with kids, they learn, with art, they learn how to express themselves. Yeah. A lot of kids just bottle those emotions and they never deal with it. And then next thing you know, this kid is like exploding and you never know where that energy might transfer to. You know, it might send them down a dark path.
Right. You mentioned Gordon Parks. You're a Gordon Parks Fellow. Will you talk a little bit about that experience and connecting to his work?
Gordon Parks is he doesn't get the recognition that he deserves. He's iconic. I remember in 2012, when I first took it, I was like, what? I want to do photography, you know. And my friend, I was a club promoter. We was throwing parties and stuff like that. And we was doing a poetry night at the time. And I didn't want to do poetry. I was like, I'm gonna take pictures and that translates better for me. And we were taking pictures and putting them on T-shirts. And I would hire a photographer, but then I wanted to do it myself because as a hustler from Baltimore, we gotta move fast, you know? Yeah. And I remember Googling black photographers, and Gordon Parks popped up. I just saw this slick guy, his hair was slicked back, he had the pipe in his hand. I'm like, this guy's smooth, like, he's super smooth. But then I saw his pictures of Muhammad Ali and his essay on the Harlem Gangsters, like and I was like, this guy, work is just like, he's going in places that I see every day, but then he can turn around and go shoot for Vogue. How do you, what is going on? This guy's amazing. And I watched Shaft, and then, my mother was like, oh, his son, you need to go watch Superfly. So I watched Superfly because Gordon Parks Jr. did that. And I'm like, this guy's like, I want to be this guy one day. You know, and that was in 2013, into 2012. So to get a call in 2017, into 2016, I couldn't say anything. They was like, you can't say anything. And they was starting this new fellowship thing, and they called me. So I'm like the first Gordon Parks fellow.
Wow.
So to call and then talk to people that actually knew him and say I remind them of him, you know, it's an amazing feeling. Like, I have big shoes to fill. You know, he's the reason why, you know, I took a job with Under Armour to shoot sports more, because of his work of Muhammad Ali would change me and inspire me.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Devin, you know how you have to mark time of something so you don't forget, because you know in the future you're gonna look back on it and be like, yo.
Yeah.
That happened.
I definitely left that conversation like I was in the midst of greatness.
Yeah.
And the world doesn't even know yet, like Time Magazine aside.
Mm-hmm.
Devin's thoughtfulness and reflectiveness and light was palpable.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's extremely thoughtful. And we talked about the work that he's doing with young people and arts education, and how the use of the arts is critical for young people to be able to see themselves in the world, make sense of the world, and give back what's really inside of them. And then he talked about his joy with his students and being able to see what they could see through their photography, and how jealous he was of them because he didn't have that at such a young age. I mean, he's Baltimore.
Yeah.
And like, not the, I'm a philanthropy and I have this mentoring program and I paid for these kids to come through here and look at them and they're the poster child for Baltimore. He's like, no, I'm Baltimore the way Baltimore is done, and you happen to get a glimpse of it, Baltimore.
Yeah.
And talked about so many things, trauma and mental health, and being conscious of how family dynamics shape us, and going into a deep depression.
Yeah.
And having that family being able to pull him out, but learning through his family about how darkness can consume you if you allow it to. So, I mean, he's achieving a great deal. He's the first Gordon Parks Fellow. And
shout out to Gordon Parks.
I can so see that, man. And that's what I got when I, you know, checking out the interview. I was just like, this dude is, I mean, I made the joke on him, but I was like, he's got some real thoughts. You know what I mean? Just the fact of, first is his sense of humility. But he reminds me, just his whole aesthetic, it's just reminding you of a man that's just kind of timeless.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
like,
the right word.
He's timeless in the sense of, like, you know, it's a beautiful thing when you grow into knowing what your purpose is. And so when you tap into your purpose and then you start to really cultivate it, and then you use it for the service of other people, not just for yourself. And one of the things that spoke out to me was when he said, not letting the knowledge die,
right?
Which is why he decided to start through, you know, through their eyes. I was like, that's right there is a man that has elevated from seeing just himself to seeing all.
Right.
And I think that that's an important place for any photographer to be in. You know what I mean? To have an eye for the universal. And so that's what I got, like his look and everything. You'd be like, well, where is this cat from? But this brother is so brilliant and so bright. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm sure he probably didn't get all straight A's in school. You know what I mean? But, you know, when you think about those who've made an impact in any field of endeavor, the geniuses of either past or even present, you know what I mean? They're geniuses because they were able to tap into a part of themselves that is so divine, so much of God.
I was about to say, to your statement about him being timeless, I feel like he was touched by the ancestors.
Oh, yeah.
You can see it in living color.
I could tell.
That their hands are on him like,
I mean,
my
Gordon
child,
Parks
you're
is
going to
there.
bring this forth.
Yeah, exactly.
Gordon
Bring
Parks
this
is
forth.
there.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean, we come across individuals like that. And I think that...
I felt blessed after having spent that time with him.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, he really does have an eye. You know how some people be like, I gotta, you know, you
I
be
take
like,
pictures.
I take, you know, I got an eye for photography. You look at your photography,
Then
like,
you get tagged in one of them blurry pictures. You're like, really?
Like, oh, that was an artistic treatment.
Yeah, I meant to do it like that. That's how I like it. But also, I also think it's just really interesting to hear from people who are so often like behind the camera or behind the notepad. Like interviewing photographers or videographers or journalists is so interesting because so often you don't hear from the person who's just documenting what's there happening in front of you. So to hear a little bit from him what's going through what hit through his head when he's making all of this art is really remarkable. And like we've gone through this entire show somehow without mentioning the death of Aretha Franklin.
It was coming for me.
Yeah. Don't worry, Dharna, we were going to get to Aretha.
Oh no! I'm just it's crazy, and I feel like this is a good time to remember, like, you know, these powerful, like politically powerful, artistically powerful figures are not just people of the past. They're people who are here with us right now, shaping like this. History is still happening. We're still making it now here. So
I think when we look at those type of individuals, as we reflect on Aretha, we got to reflect on like Michael and Prince and individual and Whitney's. I mean, when you look at individuals like that, regardless of what their challenges were, you cannot tell me that God ain't present.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Like there has to be a divine creator somewhere to produce that level of greatness.
Yeah.
And then I think that's the beautiful thing. Like, you know, whether these individuals live to 100 years or whether they just live to 30 years. You know, Dr. King, he was a young man when he died, but that's God.
Timeless.
You know what I mean? Timeless individual. Malcolm X,
yeah.
He's timeless. Like they will never be forgotten in history, regardless of who the writers are.
Right.
History will always be inclined to show them favorably. But Devin, like that is like, you know, I look up to, I see that brother, man. I've been trying to connect with that brother, but that brother has a purpose. And the thing is to see him as a young man doing what he's doing right now, like you said, that having the hands of the ancestors. I mean, that's what we all striving to do, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, Easy, you trying to get the ancestors' hands of hip hop on you.
Something.
Right.
one of these several things I do: hip hop, journalism.
Be like, can any ancestor take me?
Somebody, one of y'all hear me out. But I say, but I feel like Devin is one of my favorite things about Baltimore. And when I go outside of the city and I talk about the city, you know what I mean? I'm always like, yo, we're way more than the wire. We're way more than the corruption.
Right.
We're way more than the murder rate. You know what I mean? I personally think we have one of the illest pools of artists here. You know what I mean? Some of you have seen them on my show, The Whole Bushel.
Speaking of The Whole Bushel,
we're doing The Whole Bushel live next Wednesday at Ida B's Table with Amashandra and Jonathan Gilmore, two amazing artists. You know, I keep talking about how we went to school together and the amount of talent that was there. Right. You know, and we were from Park Heights and Yale Heights and you know, over East and, you know what I mean, Monument Street and all of that. But you know, we're singers, dancers, actors, writers, poets, photographers, just an ill pool of people that come out of this city. I think is a good example of the roses that grow from concrete, you know what I mean? And, you know, Aretha Franklin was definitely one of those examples. Devin Allen and, you know, all of my artists from Baltimore. Y'all know I love y'all, and I wave the flag for Baltimore art all day, you know, so this is a great...
Are you an ambassador, Easy?
I am a Baltimore ambassador, self-appointed. I will walk in the room and talk about Baltimore. What? What you say?
I'm an artist of peace until you talk about Baltimore.
You start talking bad about my Baltimore. I was defending Drew Hill last week.
Oh my God!
I saw them at AFRAM, and I was like, yo, y'all got to put some respect on Drew Hill's name. Yo, y'all not going.
Let me tell you something. You want to hear something?
You're
funny?
not wrong.
Hey, look, a couple of weeks ago, I'm at Morgan. They were doing some type of program for the incoming freshmen, and I sat down with a young brother. He's about 19 years old. He said, yeah, man, I'm trying to do some things with media and music here in Baltimore. I was like, well, bro, we got some fantastic artists. And he said, all right, cool. And I said, you know what? We have a tradition. You familiar with Drew Hill? Nah. I was like, oh. And I said, where you from? He said, I'm from Baltimore. I said, you've never heard of Drew Hill?
It's crazy though, because like you've probably heard Thong Song, which is ridiculous. But like,
and I'm like, he was like, oh, yeah, it was Thong Song. He had it like Thong Song, thongs, and it was like, bro, we have to do more to preserve our artistic history in the city, right? Yeah. Because I'm like, yo, Drew Hill. I mean, we had some Baltimore artists, but Drew Hill really.
They're arguably our most successful act to come out of the city. You know what I mean?
Easy Jackson said it.
I mean, UB Blake. No.
Yeah. Billie Holiday.
Yeah, Billie Holiday.
Like, I don't know about UB and Billie.
20 years.
But check this out. I don't know about that fellowship.
On Twitter?
Let's say 20, 30 years.
Okay, all
in
right.
the last 20, 30 years.
You stopped me for a second. I'm like...
Yeah, I'm sorry. Billie Holiday.
We got to contextualize it.
Contextualize it. I mean, I've been in Baltimore for 24 years, and Drew Hill was the start of it on Morgan's campus. Like,
I remember when they were down at the Fudgery.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh.
Do people know what the Fudgery is?
Yeah. Flipping the chocolate.
Got to do with it.
Do they still do that?
That was really one of the songs.
Do they?
Oh,
no, I haven't been in there.
I thought it was hilarious.
I don't think they have the Fudgery down there.
No, they still got it.
They still have it. Do they still do the singing?
Really?
Yeah, they do. But they don't do it as much as they used to.
Wait a minute, they still have chocolate?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I went down there a couple months ago. You just reminded me I need to follow up because I wanted to do a story on the Fudgery.
Yeah, I remember.
And talk
that would be
about
dope.
That. Yeah,
that would be dope.
Yeah, but they said they
I'm
still.
giving you that.
All right, now the listeners have heard it, so you have to do it. Actually.
Yeah, we got to do it now. Put it out there. All right. This has been a wonderful discussion.
Fantastic, man.
Thank you, Faraji.
Yeah, thanks, Faraji.
Why do I feel like we're on the Breakfast Club or something?
I know, right?
This is dope.
Yeah,
this is dope. Hopefully, Easy and Khalilah and Dharna, you invite me back. But this is dope.
Yeah, man.
This has been
Definitely.
fantastic.
No,
and we'll join you on For the Culture as well.
Oh snap! Are we talking about collabo?
I'm down.
Oh snap!
I'm totally. You know you can get me anytime I come up For the Culture, yo.
And I love Morgan State, so I see you over there at EAA.
Shout out to Morgan State, HBCUs. We want to thank our people behind the scenes making this happen. Stephen Frank on sound, Dwayne Gladden setting up the video component. Shout out to David Hebden. Who else am I missing? Thank you, Tracy Beal, for stepping in and taking pictures today.
Thanks, Tracy, for taking some photos.
Put some respect on her name.
Put some respect on her name.
Shouts to Mama Aretha.
As always, we want to ask you to donate to the Real News Network. We cannot do this without your support. We don't take any corporate funding. We are totally viewer funded. So thank you for those who have been supporting us so far. And if you haven't already, go to the Real News Network, therealnews.com, hit donate, and so that we can keep bringing you the real. We are, as always, we go out with some music.
Some Baltimore music.
Yeah, some Baltimore music. I think it's appropriate to play Mamouna Yousef's Say My Name, giving out topics. And it's got that old school feel, so kind of reminiscent of the Aretha Franklin era.
And reminiscent of what you were saying about Devin Allen, that timelessness.
She's another one.
Timeless record. Shout out to Mamouna Yousef. Check out her album with DJ Dummy, Vintage Babies. This is Say My Name. We will see y'all next time.
Oh no, now our YouTube video is going to get flagged. All right.
Would you believe in my innocence? Would you even come to my defense? Would you believe in the good I've done? Or will my name be spared and my story unsung? Search for the answer, go take what the hand does. Who's gonna stay with me?